extraordinary amount of houses in the country built with a 9-inch cavity, and a 9-inch cavity is able to carry the damp across, and you have the pebble dash on the outside, but it makes such a difference to those houses if you actually introduce just a 30mm batten on the inside with insulation and a new slab over it, and you can actually just paint over the slab if you do it properly, and it makes the house incredibly snugger, because a 9-inch cavity was not designed to keep out the moisture or the cold, and there's an extraordinary number of houses actually built with 9-inch cavities, right up to probably even the end of the 80s they were still at it.
Thank you, Deputy Minister.
Well, certainly Buz's expertise is very, very welcome. I've taken a note of what he said, extremely helpful, and the insights indeed from the other colleagues. I think it's right, as Deputy Kulrevi said, that we should, as it were, have a sense of as best we can of what the extent of the issue is and the extent of the problem. And Deputy Moynihan also mentioned the point about older local authorities schemes. The SEAI do a huge amount of work here. As I mentioned earlier, that I relaunched the Better Energy Homes initiative earlier this year in March. The SEI are progressing a number of innovations that I think could assist in relation to the points the deputies have made. The idea of a better green energy star, a kind of a quality rating system. They're proposing that we should engage more with local actors like credit unions, local authorities and so on to promote community level action, that we should target an advertising campaign for solar, thermal, boiler and heating controls, target public relations and radio promotions in areas of low coverage. Leinster, by the way, an area of low coverage. We should target homeowners who have done shallow retrofits or with expired applications. We should have a review of declaration of works, survey of expired homeowner grants and so on. Very practical innovations the SEAI have, which would address many of the issues that have been raised here. In relation to the, I wasn't anticipating the question in relation to the regulator. I mean, the regulator, of course, is an independent statutory body, but if Deputy Bruin has any commentary or insights in relation to that or any aspects of our energy policy, I'd be happy to consider them in the context of the Energy White Paper. But we're getting very close now to, as Deputy Kulrevi will know, because he's made, and indeed Deputy Moynihan, we've debated this issue in here before, but any insights that the deputies have in respect of any of these matters for the Energy White Paper, I certainly would be glad to have.
I thank the Minister for his response. Deputy Wallace, question 115.
Thank you, Cathaoirleach. Minister, it's much like the last question. We're trying to avoid repetition, but it'll be difficult. I suppose, just to reiterate my point, that the people who say fracking isn't dangerous, more often than not, do stand to profit from it. And there is a serious amount of research which says otherwise. And I would just appeal to the Minister to actually think really, really serious about ever dreaming of allowing fracking to commence in Ireland. I just think it's a no-brainer.
Thank you, Deputy Minister.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there is no prospect of there being any developments in that area for quite some considerable time. The EPA Commission study is underway. It won't report before the middle of 2016, and I would have thought then will require a significant period of time, either for me or for whoever has the honour of being in this position as Minister, to review and to consider, and indeed, I'm sure, to debate in this House. So, in that sense, I think I should, reassure the Deputy. The research programme, as we've already discussed, is managed by the EPA. It's co-funded by the EPA, as I mentioned earlier, my department and the Northern Ireland Environment Agency. And there's this oversight from a broad-based steering committee that includes my department. The consortium that I mentioned earlier, just to repeat, it includes the British Geological Survey, University College Dublin, Ulster University, Queen's University Belfast, AMAC Foster Wheeler and Philip Lee Solicitors, and they all have their expertise that they bring to the table. So it will be open to those bodies to collaborate together and work together on the research and on the evidence, and the EPA then ultimately to ensure that a report is produced. So in those circumstances, I think that we should allow that work to conclude, that we should have confidence that it will be robust, and then we can evaluate that in due course when it comes through, but not before the middle of 2016 at the very earliest.
Thank you, Minister. Deputy Wallace.
Minister, we have a big problem in politics in how we make decisions, because we walk from one election to the next. And on top of that, we have probably an extra big problem when it comes to addressing climate change, in that none of us see it as actually directing us in the very near future. We don't feel that it's going to affect us in the very near future. And that's a problem for us. And it has hampered people who, I mean, you take, for example, I honestly believe, Minister, I mean, you're saying, okay, you might be in that job in the next government, you might be, you might not, but you could leave your mark. This country is screaming for someone to take up a position, and you can do that, of saying, you know what, it's about time that we took climate change serious. And if you read Naomi Klein's book, This Changes Everything, I assure you, Minister, maybe you have read it, but my God, it's frightening. And I honestly think that the climate change bill that we're just bringing in now is a pittance, and it does not address the problems we're facing in the long term. And sadly, so much of our decision making is short-termist, and we really struggle to actually make plans for the long term whenever it seems to be costing us any sort of money at all.
Come back in, Deputy. Thank you, Minister.
I have to say that I largely agree with those comments of the Deputy. The problem from the point of view of political discourse is that an issue like climate change, too often people regard it as being something that someone else has to deal with, somebody else, somewhere else, at some other time in the future. Whereas it actually is an issue that affects all of us, that's already affecting our world and our planet, and that has to be addressed. And I would ask the Deputy, just in terms of my own bona fides in relation to it, that I introduced last week at a presentation on the 3rd of June, as sort of an interim presentation of the White Paper. I gave a speech on the 3rd of June. It's on the department website. I think I tweeted it. Maybe I'll do it again this afternoon. The Deputy might just have a look at it. I did pick up on some of those issues that he mentioned. It is, as I said, the greatest project of our time that we address climate change. There is no bigger issue.
Thank you, Deputy. Deputy Wallace.
Just to conclude, Minister, I mean, you know that in our climate change bill, we're refusing to put in targets for 2030, 2050, and it's a huge disappointment. I mean, Scotland have targets that are double ours for 2020, and the fact that we've left these out of the new bill is surely, if you are seriously interested in this subject, Minister, and you tell me you are, and I'll have a look at your speech, but I'm asking you now, do you think that our climate change bill that we're about to put through the House, do you think that's good enough to actually deal with the challenges?
Thank you, Deputy Colreevy.
Margaret Cahirlock, Minister, just one thing on the EPA report and on fracking. Consideration that will not, I'd imagine, be taken into consideration by the EPA report, but will have to be by the political system, and that is negotiations in relation to TTIP and ISDS. Because undoubtedly, and particularly under the investor-state dispute settlement system, energy companies will undoubtedly threaten governments. If they have to give any consent at all to even explore, they will certainly look for the money back, and may even charge government and charge them with potential profits that they claim that they may have been able to make had permission been granted. So I think that's a factor that needs to be taken into account by the political system, because it won't be by the EPA. It's not within the brief.
Thank you, Deputy. Minister, your final response.
Well, I'll take Deputy Colreevy's insights in relation to the IDSS and the TTIP. In relation to the climate change bill, I do support Minister Kelly in that piece of legislation. I think it does constitute progress. I think, in fairness, although it's important, it's only one element of what we need to do. And the notion that putting targets into legislation would, by definition, make it happen, I think is a little naive. I think that the targets have to be complied with. The international targets, they're legally binding targets. We have them for 2020. And, you know, it'll be a real challenge for us to meet the 2020 targets, let that be said. And we then now have a process that's going to come up in the coming months, particularly after Paris in December, where individual member states will be given targets for 2030. And these will be very challenging and demanding targets, and they will have to be complied with. And it will require a collective effort of the whole country, and certainly the whole political system, if this is going to be addressed properly.
Thank you, Minister. The next questioner, just to bring to your attention, we have 5 minutes left, is Deputy Colreevy.
Minister, just as we need to know the number of houses out there where we need to invest in retrofitting, we also need to know the number of houses and businesses who don't have access to high-speed broadband. Where are we at in trying to establish that level of need?
Thank you, Deputy Minister.
The National Broadband Plan aims to ensure that every citizen and business, regardless of location, has access to a high-quality, high-speed broadband service. This will be achieved through a combination of commercial investments and a state-led intervention in areas where commercial services will not be provided. I'll put the reply, I'm sure, make the reply available to deputies rather than reading it all out because time is short. There is a mapping exercise in place, as the deputy will be aware, and that shows as a matter of fact, every single home and premises can be accessed and can be identified on the map because it's an interactive map. But of course, it doesn't have a facility in it to count them all up, which is the issue that the deputy is raising. I mean, we think that there's something of the order of 2.3 million addresses in Ireland, approximately of the order of 1.6 million. Are expected to be served in terms of the indications that the commercial sector have given with high-speed broadband by commercial companies over the next 18 months. That is the commitment that has been given by the commercial sector. I understand that high-speed services are currently available to approximately 1.2 million addresses. Eircom, as you know, as I mentioned earlier, recently made a further announcement in relation to an investment that may cover a further 300,000 addresses. But I can tell the Deputy, through you, Cahirley, that my department is rigorously examining the assurances from Eircom and indeed from other operators in relation to their plans, because this is a requirement for all operators. We take seriously what the commercial sector say to us, but we don't take it at face value, and we look carefully into what they're saying to us so that we can ensure that the private sector will do what is commercially viable, and that the intervention that's required then by the state will only be in those areas where the commercial sector will not go, because we want to minimise the cost to the exchequer, obviously, and to the system in respect of the broadband plan. So that's as I mentioned earlier to Deputy Moynihan, the plan is progressing very well. We'll have a full intervention strategy going to government in July. We'll be in the pre-notification process, I hope, in respect of the state aid rules, and then get it out to the procurement process by the end of the year.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Cahirley.
I don't think we can rely on exclusively on private companies to give us the information that we need here. I suggested, I think, some 5 or 6 weeks back, that it would make sense to have an online system where if people can't access high-speed broadband, they could get in, log it, and the department have it, and keep a rolling count on it. It would be simple, inexpensive solution to a problem. Because, of course, the private companies have a role to play in all of this. Yes, they have. But the public are the people who know whether or not they need and whether or not they have access to high-speed broadband. So has anything been done to develop that suggestion?
Thank you, Deputy Minister. Your response.
Well, as I understand it, the Deputy is proposing perhaps a database perhaps of some kind in relation to the availability of broadband. We wouldn't in the first instance be a responsibility of the department. Comreg obviously have certain statutory duties and have a role as well pursuant to legislation. I suppose my focus really is to spread the access to high-speed broadband across the country, in particularly into rural areas where the commercial sector ultimately won't go. And I'm concentrating really on ensuring that every home and premises in the country has access to broadband. And I'm not sure if setting up a database will be the best use of my somewhat constrained resources in the department. But I'll take on board what the Deputy has said, because it is important that we have the information when we pursue these policy options.
I thank the Minister for his response. That concludes oral questions to the Minister. I now wish to advise the House that 29 deputies have submitted matters under Standing Order 27A, which will be listed in the official debate. Matters raised by the following deputies have been selected for discussion. Deputy Sean O'Farrell, the need to ensure that all new schools meeting the criteria for inclusion in the DESH scheme are classified accordingly. Number 2, Deputy Patrick O'Donovan, the need to extend the reading recovery programme to all primary schools. Item number 3, Deputy Michael Moynihan, the need to discuss the Post Office network in light of the Business Development Group's interim report. And finally, topical issue number 4, under the names of Deputies Terence Flanagan and Barry Cowan, the presence of lead and water supplies throughout the country, particularly in areas of Dublin Bay North, and available funding. Now propose to pause for a moment as we prepare for leaders' questions.
On my own behalf and on behalf of the members of Dáil Éireann to offer a Céad Míle Fáilte a most sincere welcome to His Excellency Dr. Ali Larijani, Speaker of the Islamic Consultative Assembly of the Islamic Republic of Iran, and his delegation. I express the hope that you will find your visit enjoyable, successful, and to our mutual benefit. You're extremely welcome. Before proceeding to leaders' questions, I understand that Taoiseach wishes to make a statement regarding the tragedy.
Concorla, I'm shocked and saddened to hear of the balcony collapse in Berkeley, California. My heart breaks for the parents who have lost children this morning, and I can only imagine the fear in the hearts of other parents whose children in California this summer as they seek to contact them now. I want to give the Department of Foreign Affairs telephone line, which is 01 418 0200. 418 0200. It's with great sadness that I confirm that a number of young Irish citizens have lost their lives while a number of others have been seriously injured. It is truly terrible to have such a serious and sad incident take place at the beginning of a summer of adventure and opportunity for so many young people on J1 visas in the United States. The Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade at Concorla has opened its Consular Emergency Response Centre, and an experienced consular team stands ready to provide all possible consular assistance to the Irish citizens affected by this tragic incident and to their families. Our Consul General in San Francisco is in close contact with the authorities and will provide assistance to those affected on the ground. It is too early to say at Concorla to know the full extent of this dreadful accident. A full investigation is underway. According to information from the local police, there were 13 people on the balcony at the time of collapse. While there is no official confirmation yet of the identities or nationality of all those involved, current information suggests that all of those involved are Irish. I had a call at Concorla from the Ambassador of the United States to Ireland, Ambassador Kevin O'Malley, who had many of the young J1 visa holders in the residence in the Phoenix Park prior to their departure for the United States. And he has expressed his sadness at this situation and has tendered the sympathies and the condolences of the people of the United States to the people of Ireland, and particularly those parents and families of the young people involved in Concorla.
Thank you. Deputy Micheál Martin.
I join with the Taoiseach on my own behalf and on behalf of my party in offering our deepest sympathies to the families and friends of all those who were killed and injured in Berkeley in California. Our hearts and minds go out to the families, to the parents in particular, that their young children, that their lives should be taken from them in their prime, in the fullness and in the beauty of an American summer, looking forward to a great number of months there, as so many Irish have done before them. It is very, very, very sad news indeed as it broke today. I think all of us in the House are united in conveying our deepest sympathies to all who have been bereaved.
Thank you.
Deputy Adams.
Could I also wish to express my deepest sympathy on my own behalf and on behalf of Sinn Féin for the families of the 5 Irish people who have been killed, who have died in tragic circumstances in Berkeley and North California, and to the families of the 8 others who have been hospitalised. Agus Tamajik Swinu, Ernadini Bacht Shaw, Agus Magiano, our Coverone, our Achala, Egan, Ur, Bronach, Shaw.
Deputy McGrath.
On behalf of the technical group and the independent TDs in Dáil Éireann, I just want to offer my deepest sympathy to the families of those who died tragically in Berkeley, San Francisco. It's absolutely an horrific day for those families, a very, very sad day for the parents, because we all know people, we all had children that went in the J1s, we all know they go out during the summer holidays over many, many years. So it's just such a sad day for those families, and I want to offer my deepest sympathies to them, and also to join with all the elected members of the Oireachtas in offering our support and solidarity, and also our deepest sympathy once again. Thank you, Concora.
Thank you.
We now move on to leaders' questions. Call on Deputy Micheál Martin.
Taoiseach, I met with staff and suppliers and workers at about midday today of Cleary's on O'Connell Street, and I want to speak to you in a non-partisan way, if I may, in terms of what has been quite a shocking and very cold and callous way of closing down an iconic and historic store in this country. There is no doubt that the workers were treated in the most appalling manner, as were the suppliers, and indeed other jobs could be at risk because of the manner in which suppliers have been treated, and indeed the concession stores and staff as well. I think it's unethical and it's immoral what's going on. I think it speaks to a lack of any respect for workers. There's an absence of decency and dignity in how this has been approached, and it is symptomatic of a trend that's growing, gaining momentum, unfortunately, in terms of a trend of a consistent undermining of workers in certain sectors of the economy. We've had it with low-hour contracts phenomenon, zero-hour contract phenomenon, and indeed this kind of utilisation of company law and financial chicanery to engineer the closure of a company at the 11th hour in a manner that does not facilitate the granting of the most basic entitlements to workers and to all those connected to the company. Some of the staff have given 40 years dedicated service, and they deserve better than this. And I would ask you, Taoiseach, I think we are witnessing probably the worst example of vulture capitalism, and I would ask you, Taoiseach, to first of all consider whether we need a fundamental review of our legislation now, both in the industrial relations space, but also in terms of company law, to ensure that this type of activity cannot continue, and to send a message to employers and to employer organisations that we live in a society, and the society demands basic respect and basic decency for workers, and that is increasingly absent in terms of how some employers are treating their workers, and that the state must intervene if it continues any further. And the most effective intervention is legislative. And would you agree, Taoiseach, to fundamentally review both company law and industrial relations law to ensure that this kind of behaviour cannot continue?
Taoiseach.
Before I respect Deputy Martin and the way this has been raised here. The treatment of workers at Cleary's, an institution in Dublin for people from all over the country for over a century, was grossly insensitive and appalling. When I heard that news, first of all, given the fact that we were making preparations in respect of the centenary commemorations of 1916, which Cleary's building and structure survived, and the statue of Jim Larkin across the street, famous for the lockout, I think it was appallingly insensitive to people like John Finn, who worked for 43 years in Cleary's and epitomised the shock and the devastation that workers felt. Minister Nash has met with the liquidator to discuss the issues surrounding this. I might say, for the information of deputies, that the Department of Social Protection have assembled a team to meet with and advise workers in relation to entitlements, job seekers payments, secondary payments, and such as rent supplement and future options in relation to alternative employment, training and education. I understand that arrangements have been made with SIPTU to use Liberty Hall as a venue to meet with workers on tomorrow, Wednesday the 17th of June. And the intention there, Cancora, is that the meeting will provide information to all workers, including those employed by concession holders. And obviously there are claims coming in from concession holders for payments and for release of stock and its value due to them. The precise format of that meeting is yet to be finalised, as workers may be involved in other meetings at Liberty Hall, but it is likely to involve the department's team being available for referral for individuals of small groups or two small groups on the day, rather than one large presentation at Cancora. That facilitates better information being sent to the workers. A representative of the liquidator has verbally advised the Department of Social Protection that all staff have been made redundant and the P45s will issue this week. It is possible that a small number of staff from the payroll area may be retained in respect of the liquidation. I understand that the liquidator will seek, on behalf of workers, payment from the insolvency